Hi, welcome to Hot Topics Live, the show, the podcast. I'm Kia Baker. I'm the creator and host of the Female Veterans Podcast, Women Warrior Stories for the Veterans Channel, and success coach at London Real Academy. I am also the new founder of Magnum Opus Multimedia, and I am working on my first documentary film. So I'm excited to share that news with everyone, and I hope that you will stay tuned for when that film comes out, probably next year. So anyway, today I have an amazing guest. We are going to be talking about holistic well-being and parenting. Okay, so I'm excited because my guest today, her name is Carla. She is an incredible human being, just all around spectacular. She works with me at London Real. She is a former student of mine, and she created this amazing podcast called the Wonder and Wellbeing Podcast. And it explores a lot of issues with education and holistic well-being and parenting and all sorts of amazing things. And so I am excited to have this time to sit down and talk with her and really pick her brain about all of these things. So I hope you'll really enjoy this episode and stick around and see what we chat about today, because we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. So without further ado, before I do that, I just want to say one thing. So a lot of you have seen in the news everything about what's going on in Afghanistan. And as a veteran, you guys know that I'm a veteran. Although I did not serve in Afghanistan, I am a Desert Storm veteran. And that's my era. And I just want to say that please check on your veteran loved ones. A lot of them are not doing well and triggered and lots of things. And as we know, the suicide rate amongst veterans is really high here in the United States. So if you're watching here, please check on your family and your loved ones, make sure they're doing all right. And there is a crisis prevention hotline, or you can tell them to go to safehelpline.org, and they can get some support and some help there. Now, that being said, I want to bring on Carla and talk about all of these wonderful things that we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, it's Carla. Hi, beautiful.
Hi, Kia. Hi, everybody.
So we were going to have a co-host today, but it didn't work out due to her internet connection. So I will bring Matilda back next week because I know how much everybody loves Matilda. I'm getting all the messages about her co-hosting with me. So I will bring her back for you next week. So stay tuned for that. But for now, us two girls and co-workers are going to just chat about everything that you have going on, Carla. So before we start, tell me, where are you and what time is it now?
I'm in a place called the Derbyshire Peak District, which is a beautiful countryside place in England, and it's 8:30 p.m.
Oh, wow. It's 12:30 in the afternoon where I am on the West Coast of the United States. So I just love how Hot Topics Live is a global show, and we can connect from all over the world and have these talks. So Carla, tell me, I'm interested to know how you got involved in education.
Wow. Well, I would say I got involved in education when I was about 17, really, in an unofficial way, because I became a teen mum. And one of the first things I thought about in those days was, wow, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I had no family support and I had no mum to look at as an example. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I remember, people talk about these moments where you hold your child and you just promise them all these things. Well, I didn't know what I was promising because I didn't really have anything. But I did know that I wanted to do the best that I could do as a parent. So I think it started from there. I was really serious with myself about how I was going to parent. And I think it became more apparent when, after I'd given birth to my daughter, a social worker came into the room and basically gave me a threat that if I didn't do what I needed to do to make sure I looked after my child, that my child would be taken away. And I think from then I became really serious about being a parent and making sure that I read everything that they gave me at the clinics, and that they give you all these free books and things in England, how to do this and how to do that, what to feed your child, what not to feed your child. And I took that really serious. And I think that gave me just like an interest to follow. And as my child got older, and then I had a second child when I was 19, I would read lots of books about education and about babies and about child development, and whatever I learned, I would just put it into practice with my kids. And then when they got to the age where they went to school, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I didn't want to go back to a career. I was doing business when I got pregnant with my daughter. I was training to work in business administration, but I knew that I wanted to be there for my kids. And so I changed to education, and I started volunteering in my kids' school without a solid plan, really. When they were like 5 years old, when my youngest child was 5 years old, I started volunteering in their school, and I just became really good at it. I found out that I was good with kids that had lots of behavior problems and special needs and things like that. I just seemed to have a lot of patience. But I think I also really cared about the kids, and that's where it started. It started with my own kids and with volunteering in their school once they went to school. And then I just did one training course after another, whatever I could get access to in my circumstances, I did it. And eventually I went to university and studied education, and that was it.
It's really incredible, because I definitely volunteered when my son was very small. I volunteered in his kindergarten. He went to preschool, he went to kindergarten, and he did half a year in first grade. And then I pulled him out to homeschool him, which we'll talk about later. But now he's going into 11th grade. So, but when I volunteered, it's funny because I love children, but I did not enjoy that. Okay? It wasn't something that would have prompted me to go into the world of education. So I really feel like that's interesting that you connected with that and it led you into a new life path.
Yeah, and I think it was because of the kids that I was working with. I was working in what they call a deprived area, which I hate, because all the types of areas where I grew up and where I was, born, and all of that, deprived areas. But actually, there's a lot of beauty there. There are a lot of things there that those people have that people in more affluent neighborhoods, or I don't know what the opposite of deprived is, they don't have. And so for me, the challenges that I faced in that, they are very real. The challenges that poverty brings, that single parenthood brings, that really struck a chord with me, because I seen that it was a cycle that continues from one generation to the next. So you're born in a difficult circumstances, and then you're not brought up with certain skills, and then your kids are born to you and you don't have those skills. And I was really conscious of the fact that that's what I was going through. And so when I saw those children and I saw the needs that they had, that made me really step up and rise to it. And even though it was really difficult, and there were times where I didn't enjoy it, there were times where I thought, what am I doing? Why don't I just go back to business? I stuck with it because I knew that they needed people who were like them, who understood where they were coming from and weren't going to judge them and call them deprived or underprivileged or any of these other things that people like to say. I felt like I found a place where I could be useful.
Oh my God, you know what that reminds me of? So when I was young, there's a lot of movies like this, but when I was young, I was so obsessed with this movie called Stand and Deliver. And it was about this teacher who was in what you would call an underprivileged neighborhood. And he went in, there's a lot of gangbang. I think it was in California and LA. And I think Edward James Olmos is the actor. But he did such a brilliant job. And he played this teacher who went in and really helped these kids. And it's so touching to watch. And it just makes me think of that. And I agree with that. Like, I grew up in West Philadelphia, right? And not in necessarily the worst parts, but not in like the best parts. And so the school was a lot different than when I got accepted to private school. And I went up to Hershey and went to Milton Hershey School. It was like night and day what was available to me and what was accessible to me. And I saw that again repeated in Chicago when I lived there. There was they did a news report, right? They did a swap. And I think this was in the first part of the 2000s. So if anyone's interested in this, but they took some kids from the south side of Chicago and took them to Naperville, which is like a really, really good school district, right? Lots of funding, right? And so they swapped the kids out and then they interviewed the children. from the high school about their experiences, right? And the first thing you see is the kids from the South Side going into this Naperville school, and they have like beautiful facilities, pristine and amazing, and the teachers are really like, different, we'll say. And then it's a more relaxed environment, I would say. That's why, if I had to presume. And then you see the kids from Naperville that are used to this type of facility go into the South Side of Chicago, where it's like bare bones, right? There's, there's metal detectors and security guards. And I remember this one part in particular. It was the gyms, right? And they went into this facility in Naperville, and they had this beautiful, like high-end gym, like something you would pay money to go use. And then in the gym on the South Side was like nothing. It was broken down. It was like missing equipment, all of that. And you could see the difference between these two schools really, really clearly. And I think that what you were doing and recognizing that these children that were in this kind of environment still really need that attention from a teacher who really cares and who really supports them, because they have enough on their plate with their environment can be very difficult, right? So it's just beautiful work that you were doing.
It is, and it's so rewarding. When I think about it now, I look back on it and I think, I wonder where they are. I wonder where all the kids are, because you lose count after a certain number of years. I was in special education for 15 years. And each year you meet, more than 100 kids, and you connect with just a handful of them as well. That's what I really loved about my job, because you're aware of all the kids in school, but you have these really close relationships with just a handful of the students who really struggle the most with all sorts of complex issues. And so after a while you sit down and you think, wow, that is really rewarding. And for me, it was important because the kids came from similar backgrounds and had similar experiences to me. So what's really beautiful about serving people is that with every person that you help, you fix a little bit of yourself as well. There's a little bit that's broken in you that you come face to face with, that you think, wow, I can fix that now. I can heal that. And that's something that people don't always know about the work of working with difficult people or in difficult situations in education or, social work or whatever. So it does help the people who are doing it as well to get over some of the things that have affected their lives.
That's amazing. So, my son has ADHD, and that's one of the reasons I pulled him out of school, because he was just having so many difficulties in the school system that he was in Miami, did not have the programs in place in time. Like, he got into a special program, but it was already too late. They wanted to hold him back. And I was against it. So I pulled him out of school, which was one of the reasons. And then I embarked on a homeschooling journey that was like very intense, and probably more than I was even prepared for. But I loved it. There was a lot that I loved about that. And I'm very glad that I did it, especially now that he's going to school this year. Actually, he's going to a technical academy. And he's going into 11th grade. So it was a long journey, but it was really, really rewarding. And I would love to get your thoughts on that, on homeschooling.
Wow, homeschooling is funny, because actually someone asked me the other day when I said homeschooling, they said, oh, so you don't actually teach your son then? Because my son is and then I thought, you know what, I should call it learning at home.
Well, there's a difference.
Yeah, homeschooling means different things to different people.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of parents and parenting. And I think parenting is a form of homeschooling. And I think all parents need to be given credit for the fact that they homeschool. But in terms of what people know as homeschooling, as in giving your child a curriculum, or even sometimes some parents are designing a curriculum for their kids, it's incredible. And I think one of my daughters said to me the other day, Mom, sometimes you take for granted the fact that you're a teacher. And it was really a profound moment, because I was like, you know what? Thank you for saying that. It's so true. I think for me, a lot of things come instinctive when it comes to homeschooling and home education. And I can educate on the fly because I've been a teacher for so long. But for parents who are not trained teachers, when they take on that task, I think it's incredible. It's really incredible. And quite often, well, most of the time, they're doing a better job than school would be doing, because they're matching whatever they're teaching, whatever they're designing, whatever they're doing to the individual child, which you can't beat, really. And I think last year during COVID, we saw like a massive increase in, parents' involvement in education, but also a lot of parents becoming aware of what was happening in school, and them making the decision then to say, oh, well, my kid's not going back to school. And then more parents were taking on that task. And I think last year was when we really realized how important education was to lots of kids, and the quality of education. Lots of people who had maybe neglected that or not thought about it really started to think about it. And homeschooling, it's not for everyone. This, it's not an easy job at all. It's not for everyone. But for those who try it and succeed and give their child what they need, it really makes a massive difference to them, but also to society, which is often overlooked, because it's like, oh, well, you're a parent, you're just doing your job, but you're not actually, because when you're homeschooling as well, you're doing the full-time parenting, which fills up your time and your energy in itself. But then on top of that, you're doing the job of educating your child formally through whatever different means that is, which is amazing. I know for me, it was really difficult. My son's also going to school in September, because even though I'm a teacher, I feel like there are certain things that I can't give him. So I'm putting him into school for that. But yeah, homeschooling is a huge topic, but for parents who succeed in it, it's incredible. We don't give them enough credit.
Yeah, I think everyone learned that last year, because when I took my son out of homeschooling, at least it was like this in Miami, which is where I was living at the time, there wasn't a lot of like a big homeschooling community. It was really difficult. And a lot of the other parents, like even in my ex-husband's family, were like, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean you're going to teach your kid at home? You know what I mean? Like, that's weird. Like, it was like almost like side eye, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? And so, and even for a lot of years, I dealt with a lot of stigma from other parents about homeschooling. And when I got here, it was different. Here by Portland, there's a huge homeschooling community, and people, there was lots of groups and things that I could participate in, lots of places to get curriculum easier and share ideas with other parents. So it opened it up for me a lot. And I actually learned that there's so many different styles of homeschooling. So when you were like, you're not teaching your kid then, well, that is actually a style that's called unschooling.
Yeah.
So, and there's a whole methodology to that people would not understand. And there's classical, and, there's all sorts of types of homeschooling out there. And I like to use a little bit of both. So I want to just shout out Carla. Thanks for tuning in, Carla. I had a special show for you today, and we had to rearrange the guests. So we brought Carla this week, and we're going to have Kate Marie another week in the future. So stay tuned for that, Carla, because you're going to love that episode. And thanks for the love. You're amazing. I see that my girl Mel's in the house. Hey, Mel's. Thanks for tuning in. She actually really helped me homeschool my son. That's his auntie. And she really was an active participant and got to see everything that I went through, all the trials and tribulations and the days of frustration. And so I think a lot of parents last year got a chance to experience that, because everybody became homeschooling parents for a while. And then you could see just how difficult it is. And I found myself in a position where I could say, hey, look, have you tried this? Maybe that could work for you. And I got to, support people that were struggling during that time. So were you able to, offer advice and support for people who were homeschooling last year?
I was able to offer lots of advice, but you know what, Kia, what really came out last year for me was how much parents were interested more in the values. And I think because of what was happening in society, parents were suddenly realizing that maybe all this curriculum stuff is not where I want to focus. That was the biggest shift that I saw. Mm-hmm. For years and years, I've worked where parents are often trying to push academics on kids that are really struggling. You know this, having a child with ADHD, that there are so many challenges that they face before they get to the academics. And I always used to call it learning to learn. When I was in my job, I would say to my colleagues, look, with my students, we're not at the learning stage yet. We're at the learning how to learn stage. So you're just going to have to bear with us, because we've got a lot of hurdles to get through over the next few weeks before we can actually get to any academics. And I think that last year I saw an increase in the number of parents who were interested in asking questions about all of the things that they had sort of put to the background in favor of academics. So how do I get my child to behave better? Is my child, I mean, the biggest one was, is my child's mental health going to be okay? And how is that going to affect their learning? That's the kind of stuff. And actually, I'm still answering a lot of questions and dealing with that now with parents, because that's really what they care about now. They're like, well, all this academic stuff and all these sometimes ridiculously high standards. I don't know about the US, but here in the UK, we have these continually increasing standards that most students can't achieve. And they are pushing that on kids to the detriment of things like values, the detriment of things like mental health, the detriment of things like family structure, and the importance of building yourself from a holistic well-being perspective, as well as all these academic pursuits. So yeah, definitely parents are asking a lot more questions now. And I think that was one of the best things to come out of COVID. They're putting the schools on the spot. They want to see the curriculum. They want to know why certain things are not covered in the curriculum. They're feeling more empowered. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's amazing when you're really involved in your kids' education, and sort of guiding the way that it's going to go. For my son, actually, we did unschooling for a year. And we just went to a lot of homeschooling groups where there were group learning activities, group science, group this, group that. And that's what it was. Instead of me doing, for the years before that, I did the curriculum and I made lesson plans and I did everything. So yeah, it's a lot of work, man. Mad props to all the teachers out there. Mad respect, because it's hard. It's hard. And then I only had one student. Like, I can imagine some of these kids, no shade on the Miami school district. There were 30 kids in that class and one teacher and like an assistant. I'm like, that's just a lot. And I have some family members that are school teachers in Miami, and it's a lot of respect, because it's hard work. It really is. And so for me, we tried different things for my son to get him to like learning, because he really hates learning. And one of the things that I discovered in my journey that could potentially help other parents is the theory of multiple intelligences. There are different ways that your child is smart, right? And if we can tap into that, we can really foster that love of learning in them, because they will be more confident. They will feel empowered, because we're giving them what they need to, letting them know that, hey, because sometimes when you're in the public school district, you think you're not smart, but that's just not the way you learn best. What do you think about that, Carla?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This was my whole career, really, Kia, because this is what I had to do every single day. I had to figure out on the fly, not only how each kid was smart in general, where their strengths lay in general, but then also how they were changing from moment to moment. Because a lot of the time we hear these buzzwords in education, even as teachers, and they'll say, oh, this kid's nature smart and this kid's word smart and this and this. But actually they change from day to day as well. Their moods change, their interests change. They're going through different stages of development. And you've all the time got to be keeping up with all the things that are changing, and their different needs and their interests and their levels of engagement, their mood. All of that has to be happening as you're going. Education is a dynamic thing. And there's no one approach that works. We hear this thing of one size doesn't fit all in a class, but it also doesn't fit all with one child either. You can't use one approach every single day and get the same results. You have to be able to adapt. And I think that's where parents are often much better than schools, because they really, really care. And I'm not saying teachers don't care. There are lots of teachers that do care. But sometimes there are other agendas at work in their education, in the system and in the school, that take precedence over caring for the kid. Whereas for parents, that's never the case. Parents are always caring for their child first. And they're always trying their best to do what's best for their child, even if that means that certain activities have to be put aside for now. That's okay with parents in a way that it isn't okay often with teachers, especially mainstream teachers. For me, I was really fortunate because I chose to do special education. And that meant that I had a lot more flexibility, and I was able to put my foot down a lot of the time on behalf of the students and fight for their rights, sometimes over the school policies. especially when I went to the Middle East, when there was more flexibility. Here, obviously, there's a strict curriculum in the UK like there is in the US.
Right.
When I was in Qatar and I was working there, I had a lot of autonomy over what I did. And it got me in trouble sometimes with colleagues and with policy and with, management of the school. But over time, when they saw that really everything I did was motivated by care for my students, they gave me a bit more wiggle room.
Well, you were the rebel educator, I feel like. But these kids need an advocate. And a lot of times, in my opinion, for me, it was I had to be the advocate, because I was like, no one's advocating for my child if I don't do it. It's a beautiful dynamic when a parent and a teacher can do that together, I think. And when you find a teacher like that, it's a real gift, right? So that you can really create an environment where your kid will love to learn and will excel, and I liked having the freedom to teach history the way I learned it. Not necessarily what was in the history books, but to teach it accurately, I would say, because, things tend to be left out. So like the 6888, for example, the first only all African-American group of females who served in World War II, right? That's not in the history books anywhere, but my kids know about it, right? So being able to have that flexibility is one of the things that I loved about homeschooling. And I think homeschooling itself is advocating for your kids. Carla had a comment, and I'd love to see what you think about this. And Matilda, we do miss you. Thanks for your message to let us know that your internet was struggling. Carla says homeschooling is hard work for parents. There are lazy parents who just want to put their children in any school. What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. There are. And there are also parents who just really struggle to know what to do for the best. There are lots of disempowered parents. That's what I've seen in my work. I've seen parents who have been told that they are not good enough to be a parent. And they've been told it directly and indirectly all throughout their lives, sometimes before you even give birth to your child. And like I said at the beginning, I was pretty much labeled as a write-off because of my age. And I think that's what made me so determined to be not only a good parent, but also an awesome teacher. I think I always had that sort of, well, I'll show you kind of thing. And unfortunately for a lot of parents, in response to Howla's comments, it's not always that they're lazy, it's that they're disempowered and they're afraid to put a foot wrong. And they think that their schools know better for their kids than they do. And that's sometimes what's behind that. Let me get you into kindergarten and school as quickly as possible before I ruin you, because I really don't know what I'm doing. And again, last year, I think we saw a little bit of a shift in that. Parents started to think, well, maybe I can have a bit more of a say. Maybe I do know what I'm doing. Maybe I would like to keep my kid at home and try something and see if I can give them something that the school can't give them. So, yeah, there are lazy parents. In fact, all parents are lazy on certain days.
I know that's true.
Yes. I know. And you know what? What's
hard
funny?
work.
I cannot teach my own children. You would not believe that. And lots of teachers will say that. I find it really difficult to teach my children anything formal curriculum-wise. My girls, when they were grade 10, I took them out of school because they were having issues with bullying. They were having issues with self-esteem and their mental health. And I felt that what they were going to gain in terms of academics was not worth what they were going to lose in terms of character, motivation, self-esteem, confidence in themselves. So I took them out of school and I said, figure it out. And I left them to it. Literally, there was no formal instruction at all. And all my friends said, I'm crazy. And they were saying, maybe you're confident because of what you've done as a job. And I said, yeah, I think it does make a difference. I know that my girls will be fine. And with my son, like you said, I tried all sorts of different things. I tried formal curriculum. I tried getting lots of books and sitting with them. I tried making a timetable. I tried homeschool community groups. And the last couple of years, I settled on an online curriculum where he does lessons in the morning and then is free in the afternoon to do whatever he wants to do. And I just let him figure it out himself, in all honesty. Sometimes we get emails from the school and I'm that parent that is an educator, knows lots of stuff about education, but I get those emails saying you're a bad parent because your child doesn't do their homework. And I'm just like, delete.
I told you, the rebel educator. But I feel that because so I had the same path as you with my son, and I think boys, they have a different way of learning in general. And I went through that whole period of teaching him how to learn, right? We were in that phase probably till like fourth grade of learning how to learn, right? And some things I had to just go, okay, we're not really like if a meltdown occurs every time we're going to write, I've got to figure out how to get around this. And, okay, so you know what I did? In all honesty, I gave up teaching him how to spell. I quit. You know why I did that? Because another mom said to me, why are you so beating yourself up about the fact that your son is having a difficult time spelling? She was like, he's going to learn how to spell as soon as he wants to text his friends. And do you know, it was true.
Yeah.
And I spent so much, like probably 3 years, like feeling like such a failure. And it reminds me of something that you said, is the labels. I was told when he was 3 years old that I was going to fail him as a mother. And so that was in the back of my mind the whole time. It's something that stuck there that I had to constantly work against that narrative, that false narrative, right? We all have different ones running through the back of our mind. They come from different people or sometimes even our own selves. But that was something that I had to like get through. And now on the flip side, with him going away, and we did online learning, and it's just like you. And I was like, oh, he's not doing his work. Okay, well, and then finally I said, well, listen, you got to tell me what you want to do. We're at the point where it's high school time. What do you want to do? And he thought about it. And I said, whatever you want to do, we're going to figure out how to make it happen. And he thought about it and he came to me and he said, I want to learn how to fix cars. And he's like, second to that, I like cooking. And I said, well, I'm going to find programs for you that do those things. And now that's where he's going off to school to do. And he enjoys it. He did so well in their summer program that they boosted him up a grade. He earned enough credits to go instead of 10th grade to 11th grade. So he'll graduate early because of that. And it's something he wants to do and he enjoys. And it feels like such a win for me, to be honest with you. It's a struggle.
Yeah. And that's a great way to describe it. It is a win. And we often forget that that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to get our children to be what we want them to be. We're not trying to get them to be the people that society says, oh, look at that wonderful job, great child that you've turned out. We're trying to get them to be who they are in their best version of themselves and on track so that they can have a good life and they can contribute something good to society. We forget that sometimes along the journey. I've seen that throughout my teaching, all sorts of parents coming in and trying to shape children that are going to get them credit from society at the expense of the child, which it sounds ridiculous, but it's actually what we do. It's what we do.
Wow. I mean, that's a really incredible insight. Carla says, good education really shapes children's perspectives and future. I have been in a lot of different school systems in different countries, and it takes me a lot of effort to readapt. My parents have never done homework with me, and I find my way out. Well, girl, I understand that. I mean, I went to private school. No one ever did homework with me. At private school. But there were tutors and stuff available to us at the school, but my parents never did any of that with me. I just had to do everything on my own. What I did learn early was how to read. I was reading at 3, and that helped me to be able to excel, which is why I got accepted to private school on academics. So, but it does really shape you, and the support that you have during your formative years with education really is impactful to your future success, I think. What do you think about that, Carla?
Definitely. I remember my dad, he did do homework with us and he was very strict, really strict. And actually, in some ways, he made things worse. I remember one time him screwing up an essay when I'd got back in those days, Kia, I used to write everything by hand with no typing. And you'd write all the way down to the pen to the paper, and then you'd flip the paper over and write all the way down to the end again. And I got right down to the end of the second side and I'd made a spelling mistake and he screwed it up, and just threw it and made me do it again. And, it did the negative things for my confidence, some of those experiences, but then it also did positive things for things like standards, because there are certain standards that I have now when it comes to presentation of things that I will tie back to those experiences with my dad. And sometimes parents are just trying to do their best. That's what I got from my dad. He was just trying to do his best. But the standards of education do make a difference. And And I think not only in terms of the academics, but also in terms of the character development. I think that's something we always forget about in education, and it's becoming more and more of an issue now. Now we've got a world full of very, very clever people that we don't really trust with our well-being. You know, they don't seem to be able to make decisions that balance well-being with intellect sometimes.
That gives me a great question for you. And hi, Tendai. Hi, sweetie. Glad that you could make it. I know you're sneaking and watching at work, so I appreciate you, honey. So that gives me a question about. Oh, well, before I ask my question, let Tendai ask his or make his comment. And he says, children need the same encouragement like learning to ride a bike or swimming. And of course, whatever path they choose, they will always remember the parent's footprint. Positive encouragement gives them the confidence and courage they need to succeed. I agree with that. I agree. Or, on the flip side of that, if you're really negative, if you're really negative, like what happened to you, it can be detrimental. In some ways, like not everybody would have taken the positives out of that. Like you were able to get positives and negatives out of that experience, but maybe not everybody can. And I certainly have done certain things with my kid along the way that I thought about later and was like, I shouldn't have done it that way because maybe that shook his confidence, and then I have to go back and make a repair attempt and hope for the best that like me trying to repair it like will undo some of that damage or maybe remove it altogether. So I mean, parenting is hard. There's tons of books about it, but each child is different. Right? Like we just need a book for that kid, right? And then it'll be fine. So since that doesn't happen, it's all just trial and error. And I think that most parents just want the best. And like you said earlier, just really afraid to screw it up because they want their kid to succeed and live a happy life. So my question was, where does holistic well-being and education intersect?
Everywhere. This is why I chose to do a podcast about that, Kia, because everyone was asking me the same thing. And I was like, can't they see it? Can't they see it? They're just like, I don't see the connection. But then I understood that it's because of what I'd been doing for so many years. All I ever saw was well-being issues. I saw children who didn't read, not because there was really something wrong with them. I saw because there was something that had gone on beforehand that was a well-being issue. And I guess it was my own childhood where I look back and I thought, well, I can't sit an exam, for example. To this day, I will struggle to sit an exam because I will go into full anxiety and panic mode. And I know that that's because of early childhood experiences. So people will try and tackle that. I've seen it happen. Now they're doing QEEG technology on children in schools and things and trying to figure out how to make their brains work optimally and all of this kind of thing. But you can't make the brain work optimally away from the situation that caused their brain to be working that way in the first place. Tackle the underlying issues. So for me, what I saw was social problems in families that had gone on from generation to generation that had affected kids' attention, that affected their ability to focus, that affected their the way that their brains were made up, and the things that caught their attention. All of those things are well-being issues. Everything is about well-being because human beings are holistic beings. So you can't educate the mind without dealing with the heart. And you can't fix any condition of the heart, I mean, like emotional conditions and things like that, without engaging the body. So for me, I just thought, nobody really sees that connection. And if they do, they're still not able to express that there is this connection. So could I do that through a podcast? And the more I started to talk to people and more I started to do different topics, the more I realized that, yeah, it absolutely does intersect with everything. There is no quality education that doesn't deal with holistic well-being. And if it does, it just produces robots. And people such as what we see, we have the massive rise of narcissists in our society now. Well-being issue. You can't turn anything on the internet now without someone giving you advice on how to deal with a narcissist. But that's a well-being issue. Somewhere along the line, there's been something's gone wrong with holistic development in well-being, whether with themselves or with their families. And that's led to them all working up here without engagement of the heart, which we know is not. It's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Absolutely. Carla says this. How do you think about the schooling system, for example, exams and scores, education years were very traumatizing for me. Also, competition between students is really destructive sometimes. Ooh, those are good points, Carla.
Yeah, definitely. I saw this in myself. As I said, I cannot sit an exam. If you put me in an exam, I will struggle, really, really struggle. I need extension. I need double time plus some more, because it will take me half the exam time just to calm myself down. This is a big issue, and we debate this endlessly in education. Parents debate it endlessly. And thankfully, there's been some headway in recent years where people are starting to realize that everything isn't about scores, and that when we traumatize kids through academics and things like that, it does have a significant impact on them. But it's not enough. I don't think we've made enough headway on it. There hasn't been enough progress. But hopefully parents, the way that parents have become more engaged, that's going to help with that situation. It is absolutely traumatizing. I agree 100%. I've met students as well that, again, sometimes people will say, oh, he just doesn't like to learn, or he's just lazy. But actually then when you dig beneath the surface, it's not that at all. It's that somewhere along the line he was traumatized because he was compared to someone unfairly, or he was given awful test scores. In fact, let me tell you a story about this student. This was a couple of years ago. He was 11 years old, and the cutest little guy. I still see his face now, tiny boy. And I was teaching in secondary school. So this was what we call grade 7, which I'm not sure what you call in the US, but it's the first year of secondary school in there.
So 5th grade or 6th, depending on the school, 5th or 6th.
Your guy's 6th grade. So you know what that age is like. They're still really cute little boys, and they just want to play. And this boy was in my lesson, and all of the students that I had were students that didn't read and write. They were illiterate, quite often in Arabic as well as in English. And I was tasked with teaching them English as a second language. And so, I have to take this very gentle approach with them. And this student just started to sob in one of my lessons. We were having a lovely lesson. It was like really close. It was like a little family in there. And he just started to sob. He put his head in his hands and he just broke down. And I was just like, what's going on? And I said to all the students, what's happened? Can you see what's happened? And he wouldn't speak to me, and he wouldn't, and where I was working, I wasn't allowed to touch the student. So in this kind of situation, you just want to put your arms around them. I couldn't do anything. I could only use my words and gestures and stuff. And I was just like, can you find out what's happened? Take him outside and talk to him, and then I can come out and we can chat about it. And when I went out to speak to this student, it turned out he spoke to his friend, and they translated to me and everything. And it turned out that he was really scared because parents' meeting was coming up. And what I'd been doing is they were all doing a writing exercise, and I was going around the room making little corrections on their papers and just guiding them and saying, just put that bit there and do this and do that. And his paper was covered in corrections. And he was scared that when his dad came, he would get in trouble because his dad would see all the corrections and shout at him because he hadn't done his work well. And so my whole lesson was derailed. I had to stop everything, go into the classroom, explain to the students that they were doing amazing. And I had to celebrate all their wins and tell them how proud I was of them all and how much they'd achieved, and never, ever let anybody tell you that what you've achieved is not good enough. And we made an agreement there from then on with that student and any other student that everyone could get access to 2 sheets of paper, one that I will make the corrections on, and then another one that you can copy the correct answers on, because they all told me that it was really common, that lots of them would get in trouble for their corrections on their papers. And I said, I'm not having this. Absolutely not. Then you will have one that's got the corrections on that we will keep in my office, and you'll have one that goes to everybody that wants to judge you by your mistakes. And that just became a procedure for me moving forward, because for me, I don't care. It sounds harsh, but I don't care about the parents, and I don't care about the teachers. I care about the students, because they're the people that I have to deal with every single day. And they are what matters to me. The message that I give them when they leave the room is the most important thing, and that is you can do it, and what you're doing is good enough. But that is, very real. It's a very real situation that we deal with all the time as teachers. And some of it's cultural as well. It varies from culture to culture. Some children come from cultures that are very scathing and very difficult for them to deal with. The process of learning and making mistakes is the two go hand in hand, but some people still don't understand that.
That's so true. And I mean, that got me in my feelings. I felt choked up because, like, this very, very difficult and very, very common. I think I definitely can think back to getting into trouble for having too many mistakes. My issue was math. And I really struggled. So where I was really intelligent in a lot of other things, especially if it had to do with reading and comprehension and writing and all of that stuff, but math was not my strong suit. So because I was traumatized by a math teacher in 5th grade or 6th grade, maybe. And so from there, I just sort of shut down for that. Now, what's interesting is when I went to go to college, I had to take like a remedial math program just to get me to the level where I could take the collegiate math because of my issues with math. And I had the most brilliant teacher, right? And he was so incredible that it came alive to me. Like teaching my son algebra, like I love algebra right now. I don't too much care about, like, I also like statistics, but I love algebra. I love formulas, so much so that I studied accounting in college and forensic accounting, which is tons of math, lots of basic math and lots of formulas. But because of that teacher, it sort of changed the whole way that I viewed math in general. It really impacted and changed my life. And just having, that's right, if we had more Carlas in schools, the world would be a better place. I agree with you, Carla. That is a very good point. Okay, everyone needs a homeschool version of Carla so that you can have your students with her, because it's amazing. Not everyone has the heart that you have for education and for teaching children and all of that stuff. So it's really amazing. And that kind of impact really does change the trajectory of children's lives. I know, and it happened for me. It happened for me several times in my education with teachers that were like standouts. I had an amazing science teacher. I had an amazing teacher for my 5th grade homeroom. My 5th grade teacher was amazing. My 6th grade homeroom, like I had really standout teachers going all the way up. I was really lucky at Milton Hershey School, but there were also a few bad ones, like my algebra teacher who had a nervous breakdown during the middle of the year. You know what I mean? So it kind of explains why I didn't really get a good hold on algebra initially. So, but we do need more people who really care, and there are tons of teachers who really care and are amazing, like you are. I love your podcast, and I want to hear what we can expect. I know that you have had so many amazing episodes, and I stalked your Instagram page. That's at Wonder and Wellbeing for anyone who wants to go and stalk her Instagram page and check out what her episodes are about and follow along with all the great guests that she has on her show. So it's at Wonder and Wellbeing, and you can hear it again, the podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts, right? So Apple, Google, Spotify, pretty much everywhere. And you had an episode that I really liked. And it was called, I see on here, it says, "How do we raise peaceful kids?" There's a couple I want to bring up before we wrap the show, but this is the first one. And Carla, you hate math too. And you have a diploma in math and computer science. That's so funny. I feel that. I feel that to my core. See, we have so much in common. So let's talk about your show and how, and the episode you had about raising peaceful kids.
Yeah, this was a really interesting one because people kept talking about, here in the UK, we've had a lot of media coverage about violence amongst teenagers. Mm-hmm. And it has a significant impact in the community. And it really strikes a chord with me having a son as well, because I never really thought so much about violence and where violence comes from until I had a son. Funny enough, because it just wasn't an issue with my daughters, partly because they weren't growing up in the UK in their teens when it really became an issue. But I think also just because they were girls and they were away from a lot of the issues that maybe could lead to them being in violent situations or whatever. But when I had my son, I really thought about this because I'm from the Jamaican community in the UK. And in our community, we have a lot of issues, and we have had with gangs and with violence and with stabbings and even shootings. And I really started to reflect on what causes that. And it's always been something I've been passionate about. I think it's one of the reasons also why I have a thing for teaching boys more than girls, because I always feel like they just need lots of care, and we often neglect their emotional needs and expect them to be tough and things like that. And so when I had a few conversations with people when I moved back to the UK, it kept coming up, this topic of violence. And I was really thinking about it for a long time. And a lot of my episodes, it's funny, the solo episodes are so short, but they often take months for me to prepare them. I have a list of them, and I work through them, and I gather information, and I have conversations. And then when I'm ready and I feel like I've got something that I can offer in a short episode for people, then I come out with it. And that's where that episode came from. It was just about why do these things really happen? Because we often deal with fixing it after it's happened, but often the damage is already done. So I started to think about what are the issues that we need to tackle. And I guess this goes back to the whole, how does education fit in with well-being? Well, a lot of it's preventative. It's trying to educate yourself to prevent some of the well-being crises that we see, rather than trying to fix them once they happen. And that's a classic example of that. Violence in children and keeping our children safe from violence and creating a peaceful world all go hand in hand. But it's mainly through prevention, through values education, through loving our children, keeping them safe, keeping them peaceful within themselves. And that means keeping our homes peaceful, keeping our relationships around them peaceful, so that that doesn't then have a knock-on effect that affects society and, you know, disturbs the peace. And sometimes we forget that. And I'm quite a deep thinker. People always say to me, "Oh, you're very deep, Carla." And that's what I do. I think about things really deeply, and that's an example of where that episode came from. Just that deep thinking and really listening to people and watching society and thinking, well, how do we really tackle this? Is it by going and sending more police out on the streets? Probably not. I think we need to have dealt with it a lot sooner than that. So for me, my podcast is aimed at parents with kids between the ages of 7 and 14, which, from what I've learned in education, is the age at which we can do the most good. We can influence them. That doesn't mean we can't work with teenagers, but quite often teenagers have got some very ingrained ideas, and you have to get in early with kids to teach them and love them enough to keep them on a straight path. And it can be really difficult. Really, really difficult.
Well, I will tell you this. So my son, he is a violent child, like not in the way where he would seriously hurt people, but I'm like, he's created a fight club in our neighborhood. He's a boy. Like, what do you want? Like, I remember he was in first grade on the playground, and he was like, we're going to play zombies. And he was like shooting, you know, and they were zombies, and some of them, there were zombie hunters. And I got called into the school, of course, because my son was shooting on the school. But I was like, what happened to being a cowboy? Like, what happened to like the games, like being a space hero, and you know, kids, these Nerf guns. Like, it was like a very difficult thing for me. Like, well, I get it, I understand, okay, but at the same time, he's a boy, and boys love to play like that. So I think that when you have that kind of playfulness and you have like fighting, they like to roughhouse, and you know, I get triggered. I don't like a lot of roughhousing, but they're boys, and I have 2 boys. So the balance is, how do I allow them to be boys and be rough and tumble and, you know, and violent to an extent, but also send them out into the world as good human beings that are peaceful. So how do I do that, Carla? I think I've got it handled, but I just want to hear your take on it in case I'm missing anything.
What? The first word that came to my mind when you said that, I thought warriors. There is such a thing as a warrior. There is absolutely a warrior. And the one thing we don't understand a lot about human nature, we live in the times where we're supposed to be the smartest we've ever been, but we dismiss a lot of things to do with human nature. And there is such a thing as boy behavior. There is such a thing as a warrior spirit. And it isn't always in boys. I have a daughter, actually, that's she's a kickboxer.
Yeah, I love it.
It was the kickboxing that kept her well. When she was going through depression and she was having a hard time in life, she went to kickboxing and she became an amazing person. It created some kind of balance in her character because she needed to let that out. And she told me, Mom, I just felt angry. And I don't know why I felt angry. But when I would get into kickboxing, I would feel calm. And so for me, I think there are certain people in our communities, there are certain people in every culture, in every society that have a warrior spirit, and they are strong. They are made for defending. They are made for stepping forward when stuff gets rough. And the only thing we have to do with those is not suppress that. That's what society tries to do. It suppresses it and pretends that it doesn't exist. Not everyone can be a diplomat. My son is a diplomat, but my daughter is a warrior, you know. So I think it's about the balance. It's about teaching kids who have a warrior spirit, who are strong, who are good with their body, who do want to step forward and defend things physically, how to do that with balance, how to do it with integrity, rather than saying, oh, well, you don't need that. We don't need that skill in society anymore. And if you have it, then you're no use and you're a threat, because that's not true. And that's how we push them. When we when we respond to something natural with an extreme, all we do is create another extreme. And I think that's what we see in society. We create excess violence when we don't teach people how to channel their warrior, strong, courageous spirit into good things. You know, they're constantly, we're going to need it, right?
Beautifully said, actually. And I think that's the approach I've taken with my kids. One is more of the sweet, empathic one, sort of more like me. They're both empaths, actually. But one is more of that strong, rough warrior. And I always have to sort of shape him and mold him into allowing him to channel it out positively. He does Kung Fu. That's what he does. I love kickboxing, by the way. So I identify with your daughter. But knowing each kid and knowing how to, you know, foster that sense of putting that energy where it needs to go into something positive is really good. And he loves video games and he gets a lot of it out that way too, but also through roughhousing and organized fighting with the neighborhood kids. I live in a community with a lot of boys. So it's like, they love this kind of stuff. And my son is typically the ringleader of all of that. So, and he's also an effective leader. So it all works out well. It plays to his strengths. And I think allowing him to get that energy out does allow for him to be a lot more peaceful. Tendai says this, "Aw, honey, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that you lost your father." So he said, I lost my father a few days ago, and he was an educator before he retired. Growing up, my brothers and sisters knew that we had to take education seriously. But back then, teachers, parents, and even neighbors had the right to discipline kids. So it actually worked well as instilling discipline. But I understand there's always a cultural and societal difference all over the world. This is true. And still, I miss those days in a way, because I think it takes a village to raise kids. I often feel really unsupported. Okay, as a single mom, and missing that sense of community. But I do have a kind of a core group of moms, and we all do that. We all look after each other's kids, and we all kind of support, but we are all very busy. And it would be nice to have that more of a sort of village feel to it. But I actually sort of miss those days when there was, you know, everyone was involved in making sure that the child grew up safe and grew up well, you know, and developed into a well-adjusted human being. I mean, it didn't always work, because back then also there was like excessive discipline in a physical way, which doesn't always work for children. Some people have more of an ability to tolerate that kind of physical discipline, and some people it breaks them completely. So, I mean, that's also something that was from back then that wasn't actually good for me. But yeah, I do miss that kind of vibe. And again, babe, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. It never gets easier. I lost my father many years ago, my mother a few years back, and it doesn't get easier. So I feel your pain as an empath, and I'm sending you lots of love. So, Carla, there was something else I wanted to talk to you about that I loved from your Instagram page before we wrap in about, 10, 15 minutes. So you have something on here. It says why helping kids identify their gifts matters and how to do it. Okay. Now, I personally feel Like that could be a whole episode of Hot Topics in and of itself. Okay. But I want to talk to you about that a little bit and get your thoughts on why you decided to have an episode that was about this topic.
Yeah, again, this is experiences. Conversations are usually the trigger for my podcast episodes. And when the same conversation keeps coming up over and over again, then I think, you know what, this is an episode because there's a trend here. I speak to a lot of adults who are not happy with their lives, Kia, and they don't really know why they're not happy with their lives. But then when they start to dig into it, it's all about not being where they're supposed to be. And that doesn't mean just in terms of achievement. It means in terms of where they want to contribute. So we always see people in, we see them in different jobs and we say they're successful, but there's so many people who are unhappy because they feel like they're in the wrong job, they're in the wrong career, they're in the wrong relationship, they're doing the wrong things with their life. And for me, when I analyzed it and I talked to people and I asked them questions and figured out what was going on, it was all about the fact that they discovered later on in life what they were good at and where they should be, but now they're so far away from that place. And then also talking to parents who were saying that their kids are not happy. It's sad to say, but a lot of our kids are not happy and they're getting more and more unhappy at a younger and younger age. And that's because they also feel like they're not in the right place, which is incredible. Imagine being like 13 and feeling in life that you're just not in the right place. You're not doing what you're meant to be doing. I'm just like, what? How can we fix that? We fix it by letting people know where they're supposed to be at the youngest age possible. And that doesn't mean they're going to be in one place forever. That's not what I'm talking about. It's knowing what they're good at and helping them to figure out what they're good at and find satisfaction in what they're good at so that they can guide themselves using that and avoid some of the pitfalls of, oh, I'm in the wrong place. I feel like I've done the wrong thing with my life. And I feel like I'm not contributing enough. And yeah, I'm making money, but I don't really feel satisfied, it's a trend. It's been a trend for many, many years. And people used to call it affluenza or, something that only affected Western societies, but it's not. You speak to people from all cultures and all walks of life now who say the same thing. And from what I've seen as a teacher, as a parent, as a mom, and even in my own experiences in life, everything goes back to your strengths and your talents and gifts and using those to give not only yourself a sense of well-being, because that's what we get when we pursue our talents and gifts, we get this sense of well-being, but also we get the additional bonus of being able to contribute in the maximum way without burning out, which I learned from teaching. The whole concept of burnout is huge in education because a lot of the teachers are either struggling to keep their head above water because of all the standards and things like that, or they were never meant to be teachers in the first place. And they are struggling because they're not even happy in the profession. They're resentful and they're annoyed and they're teaching people's kids when they're resentful and annoyed, having an impact on that generation of kids who are also ending up filtered through systems that are not helping them to concentrate on their talents and gifts, but pointing them in directions for success or careers that are going to be well paying. Which is just repeating the same cycle over and over again. You're going to have people who are not in a state of well-being and not contributing to society in the way that they want to or can.
Wow, that's amazing. So how do we help them? How do we help foster our children's gifts?
I think you have to give them some freedom because you find your talents and gifts by being free to find them. If we schedule kids with things that we think are going to make them successful, that defeats the objective. You have to give them a system whereby they can discover who they are. They know when they're young. If you leave them alone when they're young, they usually find it. My son, he's always upstairs hacking away at all sorts of different things. Yeah, and he'll come down and ask me for random things like, have you got tape, a ribbon, and an empty box? And I'm like, yeah. And then he'll come back down again and ask me for flour and some rice grains and 2 batteries. Okay, very specific list. There you go. I leave him alone, and that's because I know that if I leave him alone, he will figure out where he's happy. He's been upstairs for about 3 hours now. He came down, he ate, and he's upstairs, and I can hear him rattling about, making stuff and doing all sorts of things. That is one thing. It's a very simple thing, but leave them alone. Let them develop skills. Let them explore things. Let them make things. let them try things and then not like it. Sometimes we stop them from trying things because we want them to stick with something. So we'll be, saying, oh, well, you're trying things all the time, just stick with something. That's wrong, because they're only going to stick when they find that place, and you won't need to tell them if they find that place. It's not that complex. We think it is. And again, this goes back to parents feeling that they're inadequate, that you don't know anything. You absolutely do. You let your kids be them. Let them explore their interests and facilitate them to explore. Give them the things that they need, but don't put them in boxes and tell them that they can or can't do this, this, and that. Guide them, facilitate them, support them. And of course, if we see them going in the wrong direction, doing something that's just ludicrous, we're going to say to them, well, no, maybe that's not the best thing. But those examples are often used just to put parents off doing what they should be doing, which is just let your kids be be themselves. Let them be kids, let them play, let them explore, and let them find that place where they get in their zone, where they get into that place of well-being, where they're happy in themselves, but they're also contributing something amazing to other people. When their eyes light up, then that they're in the right place.
For sure. That's what it was like for my son. Tried tennis. He tried, what else did he try? Taekwondo. He liked blacksmithing. He tried, and I was always like that. I got actually a lot of shade for that because I never made him stick with anything, actually. So, I mean, that really actually makes me feel really good when you said that, because it's difficult. It's difficult when you're kind of going against the grain of everyone around you, but you're determined that this is what's best for your kid. I always felt like when he finds his passion, I'll know, because you'll know when they know. So, but he really loves Kung Fu. That's the thing. He's taken breaks, but he's always gone back to it. So I love that for him. And now it's cars. Now it's working on cars, and he wants an old Toyota so that he can rebuild it. And I think that's really cool, because both my older brother and my grandfather worked on cars. That's one of their things that they do. So it's just really interesting that he found his way to that. And it's kind of something that runs in our family on my mom's side. So I love that process. And I think that we could talk a lot about children and their holistic well-being and education. And I think everyone should go and listen to your podcast because it's a really great show, and follow you on Instagram, because there's a lot of great information there, and you have a lot of really good guests on your show. I wanted to ask you what kind of guests that you have on your show most commonly.
At the moment, most of the guests for I would say into October are coaches, because I work with a collaborative of coaches who are trying to bring education and coaching, the world of life coaching and all sorts of different coaching together so that we can get those benefits for parents and teachers to improve education. So mostly this year, I've been working with a lot of coaches. But next year, there'll be some new things coming because I'm working a lot locally as well. Now that I moved back to the UK, I'm collaborating with some local projects in arts. And one of my recent projects is a baby bank, where it's a charity, and it's just beginning, collecting things for mums who are struggling to have things for their babies. And that's given me lots of local connections with people who want to improve community-based things for parents and teachers. So that's going to be an exciting development coming in 2022 with podcast episodes. And probably towards the end of 2021 as well, you'll start hearing more episodes with guests that are local to me. Maybe they'll be next to me because we haven't got COVID. Yeah, we're not in a lockdown at the moment in the UK. So if that holds up, maybe you'll see some face-to-face interviews in the local community. I'm so excited about that, because podcasting remotely or online and stuff like this is great, but also when you get guests face-to-face and you have conversations face-to-face, it's also another exciting thing. So I'm really looking forward to that, some conversations face-to-face. So watch out for that.
Oh, that's going to be fun. And let's talk about really quickly, Podcasters Unleashed. What do you guys have coming up?
Podcasters Unleashed, we've got all sorts coming up. So this week we're going to be talking about the situation in Afghanistan, which is all over the media and in everyone's
Yes.
topic of conversation at the moment.
Mm.
And soon we also have some more spotlight episodes. We're going to look at Howler and Matilda's podcast journeys in the next few weeks.
Nice.
So this will be exciting. And who knows what other topics, because we tend to think of topics on the fly based on what's going on, what conversations we're having. Sometimes we plan them in advance, but at the moment we're taking topics that are coming up that are relevant to society and ways that we can discuss and raise awareness of things. So that's what's coming up this week. We're talking about Afghanistan.
Well, you know how I feel about it. My heart just goes out to everyone who served, who was deployed from all around the world, who went to Afghanistan, and just I just want to say that it wasn't a waste. And I know that a lot of people are just feeling a lot of emotions, all kinds of emotions, and as an empath, it's just heartbreaking for me to see people suffer. So I'm just sending love to everybody, and I know that's going to be a great conversation that you guys are going to have. I really enjoyed your conversation last week. I happened to have time for a change, and I popped on to see what you guys were talking about vaccines. And I really liked that there were so many differing perspectives. Some people were taking it, some people weren't taking it. There was a lot of strong opinions from those that were watching. It was great to be a part of and to chime in and say my 2 cents. As you know, I am vaccinated. So it was a great show, and I think everybody should watch. And you can watch Podcasters Unleashed on Mondays. What time are you guys on?
7 p.m. London time, and I think it's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but check. Just
yeah, you can Google it. And you can listen to Podcasters Unleashed anywhere you listen to podcasts, right?
Yep, it's everywhere. Just Google Podcasters Unleashed. You can also find us on Facebook and also on YouTube as well, and our Instagram page.
Excellent. So, Carla, I want to say thank you so much for being a guest on Hot Topics Live today. This was a long overdue, and perhaps the next time you're on Hot Topics Live, you'll be my guest co-host.
Yeah, I would love that. It's been a pleasure to join you today. So excited. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely, me too. So I'm going to put you in the green room, and I will close the show, and then I will come and say a proper goodbye if you have time for that. But I know it's late for you, so if you don't, I will totally understand, and I will catch up with you later. After all, we do also work together at London Real Academy, so we'll have plenty of time to run into each other. So I will say goodbye, and thank you again for being on the show. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for tuning in, you guys. If you have made it this long in the show, then you are part of the soul family of Hot Topics Live. And next week, I'll have another great guest host. And so we'll talk more about interesting topics. And I don't know what it's going to be yet. I'm going to be a surprise. So I'm Kia Baker. I am the creator and host of the Female Veterans Podcast, Women Warrior Stories for the Veterans Channel, an upcoming series. And about that, for those of you who have been watching for a while and hearing me talk about that off and on, the first episode or featurette is in post-production. So I'm really excited to see how it turns out and see it actually come to life. So stay tuned for that. I will share that as it develops. And you can follow me on Instagram at Creativity is my personal account. And don't follow me or send me a friend request on Facebook. Please go to Instagram and follow me and send me a message there. I check that. And if you want to correspond with me, do it there, please. Hot Topics, the podcast, is on Instagram as well. You can follow along all news about Hot Topics on Instagram at Hot Topics, the podcast, and you can listen to it in podcast form also. And at the Female Veterans Podcast. So if you are a woman, man, you have male listeners too, or anyone interested in hearing stories, good and bad, real truth, real talk about experiences in the military, then go check that out. You can catch it anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. I'm trying to build my subscribers up just like everybody else. So do me a favor and hit like and subscribe and share and have watch parties if you're on Facebook. And you can catch the replay anytime. There's a lot of episodes. There's a lot of episodes of Hot Topics Live. So check it out. I'm sure there's something that you'll really enjoy, you'll really like. But as always, thank you for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.